everyone. Welcome. My name is Janice Kraft. I'm the co-chair of the General Programming Committee for the AALS Section on Balance and Well-Being in Legal Education. We will get started in just a couple minutes. We want to make sure that folks have plenty of time to join us before we kick things off. But again, welcome to everyone who is here. We've got some great presenters, and we will get started momentarily. For those who are just joining, we're just waiting another minute or so to allow for maximum participation at the top of the session, and then we'll get started. And again, we're just giving it another minute or so before we get started, just to allow for folks to get into the room. But thanks everybody and welcome. We're very happy to have you here. All right. I don't know, it seems like we might have a critical mass, and we'll go ahead and kick things off, I think. So hello, welcome everybody. Again, my name is Janice Kraft. I am the co-chair of the General Programming Committee for the AALS Section on Well-Being, Balance and Well-Being in Legal Education, along with my formidable co-chair, Jordana Confino, who is with us today. Just on behalf of the entire committee and really the section, just welcome and thank you so much for being here at our 5th of 6 SpeedShare presentations that we are offering this summer. Before we get started with our awesome presenters, I wanted to see if Leah was here, and if she isn't, Tamar, I might put you on the spot if you wanted to offer just a quick announcement about nominations for awards, if you are able to do that. Tamar?
Hi.
There she is.
How are
Hello.
you? Yeah,
Good.
just a reminder. I actually don't have the dates in front of me because I wasn't expected to be called on.
I'm so sorry.
But yes, we have nominations open for the section award. It's going to be, the deadline is sometime towards the end of August, and we had a long time frame, so I know summer is difficult. So if you're interested, email has gone out, and we'll go out again next week as a reminder on the link to fill out the form. So we look forward to receiving nominations for the section award. Thanks so much, Janice, for letting me announce it.
Thank you for hopping in. I appreciate it. Didn't mean to put you on the spot
That's
there,
okay.
but thank you. But all right, well, then I think we will go ahead and get started with session 5. Today, we are here to discuss a framework for teaching and exercises to support students' professional identity formation. So today, we're actually going to start with Professor Heidi K. Brown. She is the Director of Legal Writing and Professor of Law at Brooklyn Law School. She's going to talk to us a little bit about the flourishing lawyer. Take it away, Professor Brown.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and see so many familiar faces. I've been on sabbatical for the past year, and it's given me a ton of time to think and study and reflect on my own professional identity and what kind of teacher I want to be when I step back into that classroom next month, really for the first live classroom experience for me in 2 years. And I want to be a teacher that helps all of our students flourish. I want all of us to help one another flourish as teachers. And to me, that means somewhat reinventing the way we approach legal education. So my focus, my research and writing over the last year while I've been on sabbatical has culminated in my new book called The Flourishing Lawyer. And the research that I really focused on the past 2 years, I've been studying the field and the science of positive psychology. And what I learned in my studies, trying to get the PowerPoint to move. What I learned in my studies is that if we look at professional identity through a well-being lens, we can teach our students that well-being is two-pronged. It's not this feeling of happyology. It's not this sense of hedonic well-being where we just need to feel good all the time. We can teach and model for our students that true well-being and thinking about professional identity through the lens of well-being is this concept of eudaimonic well-being, the EU representing the Greek letters for good, the Greek root for good, functioning well. We can teach our students and model for our students that yes, our jobs, our careers, our studies are difficult. They're not always going to put a smile on our faces, but that's okay. If we build in systems to help us function well, we can experience well-being, and we can carve out our professional identity in a way that we can last decades through this career. So I kind of joke in my writing and in my classroom that I was mad at Socrates for a good 2 decades because of the Socratic method that I thought he invented and I felt victim to in law school. But when I started researching Socrates to write about some of his teachings and actually his true method, I discovered his motto was know thyself. So I feel like if we can teach our students that Socrates was sort of the brand ambassador for intellectual humility, getting to know ourselves, we can start to study professional identity through a really open-minded approach. So I've been studying, and what I wrote about in my new project is trying to redefine what it means for us to have character and fitness for the legal profession through a well-being lens. I'm sure all of us are asked by our students to fill out their character and fitness affidavits, and we all say yes. But for me, it feels like it's just like become an act of checking a box. And what I'd like to do is start teaching our students, talking to our students, being vulnerable with our students about our own definitions. What does it mean to have character? Can we cultivate it? And can we cultivate multiple dimensions of fitness to practice law, starting from day one in law school? So one really helpful tool that I discovered in my studies, which many of you probably already know about, the Values in Action Institute on Character has this awesome free scientifically validated assessment where students can fill out this assessment. It's 96 questions, and it generates a report where it situates 24 character strengths within 6 virtues that have been studied by philosophers over the ages. And what it does is it gives us this report that helps us educate ourselves, first of all, but provide our students with a language and vocabulary around their strengths, what strengths they all bring to this profession and the classroom. And the coolest thing about it, the report generates a list of 24. It tells us our top 5 what they call signature strengths. They have 3 E's. They energize, excite, and come easily for us. And then it ranks our middle strengths and our lower strengths. And it teaches us a vocabulary around strengths that we can spot in one another. Another cool fact about the character strengths, there are 5.1 million constellations of the top 5 signature strengths. So we can teach our students that every single one of them brings a unique constellation of strengths to the classroom, to the law classroom. Moving on to fitness, since I know this is the speed share, I want to empower our students to think of themselves as scholar athletes or scholar performers. And we all know that athletes and performers don't just focus on the singular skill that brings glory on the field or on the stage. They have trainers and coaches and people around them, healthy people around them that help them tend to multiple dimensions of their fitness so they can perform either on the stage or on the field or on the court or whatever analogy we want to use. So what I'd like to do for our students is get them talking about multiple dimensions of fitness to practice law, not just the substantive intellect, the doctrine that they're going to learn and be excited about in their classrooms, but what does occupational fitness look like, emotional? What I have on the screen now, the National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing in 2017 generated a report identifying these 6 dimensions of well-being. I think these can be 6 dimensions, 6 conversations we can generate with our students about professional identity, occupational, emotional health, physical health, intellectual health, spiritual health. What does it mean to have meaning and purpose in our legal education pursuits? And then social well-being. In my research and in my book, I've added 4 more because I think I really want all of our students to realize there's an artist in every single one of them. There's an artist in each of us as teachers. The law is not always clear on its face in the statutes and cases we read or the regulations or the contracts. It's just not always clear. So we have to be creative in problem solving. Obviously, cultural humility is a huge aspect of professional identity. We need to be able to collaborate and interact across cultures. And so understanding what that means through a well-being lens and understanding we're going to have rough conversations, that's an aspect of professional identity we can help our students walk through. And 2 more, moral and ethical well-being. What does that mean? How do we make tough decisions? And then finally, the caring and caregiving aspect of being a law student, of being a lawyer, having healthy, understanding the differences among sympathy, empathy, and compassion, understanding how to set up appropriate boundaries and see signs in ourselves and others of trauma or vicarious trauma. So I think my time is up, so I will end there. I've written a couple articles about this, some ABA journal articles and an Attorney at Law magazine, and I'm happy to provide these resources. And I also have a pretty lengthy curriculum that I think Janice is going to try to put in the chat. And I always love to hear from all of my awesome colleagues, so please feel free to reach out if you have questions, but I will stop there. Thank you.
Woohoo! Applause all around. Thank you, Heidi. You came in a minute under, so you did a fantastic job. I did drop the Flourishing Law Student document in the chat earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in there again for folks who joined us after I included it the first time around. So thank you so much, Heidi. And sort of moving from this framework for teaching and thinking about identity formation well-being, we're going to narrow our focus and look at these specific exercises that we can use across a variety of classes and experiences for our students to help them cultivate these professional identities. So we are going to begin with Jamie Abrams, Professor of Law and Director of the Legal Rhetoric Program at American University, Washington College of Law. So Jamie, take it away.
Thanks, Janice. Is everything okay with the PowerPoint?
Everything looks great.
All right, I'm going to focus, great to see you all here. I'm going to focus my time on building off of what Heidi just introduced. What can we do in a Socratic classroom particularly? And I'm going to talk about using voice-based tech tools in our classroom. So just as some setup, our Socratic critique, Heidi gestured to it in her presentation, but many critiques, of course, of the Socratic method over the last 50 plus years of scholarship. But the things that interest me most in this presentation are how the Socratic method might actually undermine our other efforts to achieve professional identity formation throughout the curriculum. It is individualistic, it's professor directed instead of student centered, it's often hierarchical, professor led. And it's repeated systemically and extensively. Students are forming habits and modeling what they think lawyers do from that Socratic exchange. It really values, like a strong Socratic performance in class, really values a certain degree of certainty and confidence that doesn't always align with the judgment and the thinking that goes into lawyering. And the actual real day-to-day client work and lawyering skills are often obscured. And so my presentation today is focused on how we might use voice-based tools to supplement an existing Socratic classroom. I have here a bunch of names of different products. I'm going to focus on the first 2, Flipgrid and VoiceThread. But if anyone loves something different or has a really good experience, feel free to please share it in the chat or share it with others. But I'm going to focus on Flipgrid and VoiceThread. And so these are tools that you could embed into any learning management software that you use, from Blackboard to Canvas, whatever you use. The first one I'm showing here is Flipgrid. Flipgrid, candidly, is a little bit juvenile at first glance. You can see that I've, like, if you look on the right and you see the little pencils, it looks a little juvenile. So I've tried to add a little more imagery to help make it a little bit more engaging. But what you do is you create a Flipgrid site for your class. And at some schools, particularly public schools, you might need to put your students' emails in, so they have to register to create an extra layer of security. But once they're registered, then you can load it up with various topics that they're going to point to throughout the year, and then you hyperlink to that site in your syllabus. And I'll give some examples in a moment. VoiceThread, in contrast, looks a little more professional, but a little denser and a little less inviting. So here's a picture of VoiceThread, and you can kind of see the different projects that are queued up. This is in a family law class particularly. And likewise, they're hyperlinked out from that learning management platform. So easy access for students, but this is the platform where they sit. I personally use PowerPoints as my platform to get into the voice-based assignments. So here are some ways that I particularly like to use voice-based assignments. And what I'm really trying to envision here is a model that is efficient, that is something that can be spread sustainably, getting away from this idea that one program with pizza is going to be a sufficient way to implement the professional identity formation requirement. We know that it's supposed to be developmental, that it's supposed to be throughout the curriculum. So some ways that I see these teaching techniques fitting into Socratic classrooms, the way that I've used them before, is asking students to argue litigation motions and then listen to someone from the other side and engage that way. Responding to a prompt or a practice problem from an existing material, but actually talk to the client in a voice-based prompt. You don't even have to write any new content. You can just gesture to slide, note 3 on page 24 and ask students to respond in a voice-based prompt. They can work collaboratively to advise a client to work through a practice problem. And they can do a capstone exercise after you finish a whole unit, like on child custody. They could record a little CLE for a future client, and students could listen to them and critique them. Or they could pitch business about why would someone even need to hire a lawyer for a child custody case? What are some of the benefits of it? So those are some general examples. Let me show you a couple more concrete examples. So this is an example of a voice-based prompt that I've embedded into a torts course. And so the prompt I'm giving them is a strict liability prompt, and it's in my casebook, or it's in my set of problems that I give students. So they have more on it than what you can see here. But basically, they're going to have to brainstorm whether this community that's heavily impacted by fracking might have a strict liability claim in torts. And there's lots of factors involved in this. So I actually have them do this collaboratively, where they each weigh in on a factor, and then they're in small groups, and there's like groups of like 6 to 8, and they'll each analyze one factor, and then they'll build off of each other. So if you kind of look at the bottom, you can see these are those little breaks there are the contributions of each student engaging with each other. And then I listen to the whole thing, and I offer a recording at the end or a global memo to the class. Another example, this is for a torts class as well. I have students watch a video about Henrietta Lacks and the theft of her bodily cells at Johns Hopkins University. They watch a video introducing it, and in it they describe the possible claims her loved ones might have, her heirs might have, and they watch it and then they analyze whether she has a claim. So they're role playing as a sort of law firm, analyzing whether they could bring her claim. Why these types of techniques? What's the benefit of them? I think they're particularly helpful because they can be efficiently added to existing books and materials. We don't have to re-envision our classroom, but we can help students all find their voice. If we were to do these same things in a Socratic exchange, one bold student with a lot of swagger is going to suck up all the air in the room and answer the question. And really, other people are still formulating their ideas. They haven't developed their voice on it yet. So you can be more inclusive in getting all voices engaged. It can be more sustainable once you just cut and paste them into future years. It can be it puts students speaking as a lawyer. So it's the kind of thing you might do in a Socratic classroom, but they're actually speaking as a lawyer, representing a client, truly finding their voice and actually using their voice. They have to use communication skills. A lot of times they're talking in my courses, torts and family law primarily, about delicate topics. And they have to show compassion and empathy and sympathy, especially if they're giving hard legal advice to a client. And perhaps most importantly, they're really scalable. I can put my earbuds in and listen to the student feedback and then just record one finale at the end. Great job. I particularly liked this point or that point. You could have also considered this point or that point. It automatically pushes out a prompt to them that's there. They'll hear my conclusion. It really scales nicely into a larger Socratic classroom. So that's my speed share idea. I'm happy if you happen to teach torts and family law and want any of those materials, I'm happy to share those particular ones. or brainstorm how this might fit into your particular courses offline.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jamie. And I should have mentioned, and I apologize that I didn't before, we will have an opportunity for Q&A and discussion after all of our presenters have had the opportunity to offer their presentations to us. So please stick around for that. And I can see that there are some questions coming in on the chat, and please feel free to use that function as well. And we will do our best to get to everybody's questions at the end of our presentations. So thank you again, Jamie. And next on our list is Robin Juni. Robin is a visiting associate professor in the Fundamentals of Lawyering program at the George Washington University Law School. Thank you so much, Robin.
Great to see everybody. As of July 1, I'm no longer visiting and full service faculty, so that's hugely exciting. My exercise is inviting students to take on some of the key parts of professional identity formation in the context of a speaking exercise. So what I do is give them handouts, which are at the end of my slides, so you'll have access to those to adapt for your own use. There are 3 roles in each triad of students: a speaker, who is the student role on which we're focused and the role who's being asked to engage in professional identity formation skills. The receiver, which is intentionally not called the listener, which is 3 different roles, and an observer coach for each of the triads. I'm speaking in the context of what we call Fundamentals of Lawyering, our lawyering skills class to first-year students. It would be quite easy to adapt this exercise to almost any context. I've used this historically in having students talk about their research findings for the very first assignment in the fall. So it's the first time that a 1L will have had to read a handful of cases and then say something about them as a professional. The task of the observer coach and the receiver to a secondary level is to give feedback to the speaker on whether the speaker is addressing the concerns of the receiver and getting the information across to the receiver effectively. This is good practice. Each round is 5 to 7 minutes of speaking and 2 to 3 minutes of feedback. So a short time, just like this presentation today. So the whole thing, as you see on the slide here, takes about 45, 50 minutes. So it's a pretty short exercise that I think gives students a few different things. First, of course, they're speaking as an expert for the first time. They need to deal with ambiguity in the cases. The cases are not clear, they're not consistent. That's what research is always going to come up with. And each of the receivers, the partner, the higher level supervisor, sort of the mid-level associate supervisor, and the client, each of the receivers has themselves varying abilities to manage ambiguity and has sort of their own baggage that they come in with, right? The partner's role says, you're extremely busy. You know, what does this intern want? You know, why, you don't want your time to be wasted. The associate is afraid they've missed something, and the client is somewhat unhappy to be in the lawyer's office at all. So the student has to deal with those differences and next decide how and how much to convey. Make that professional judgment. Here's why I chose to focus first on X or Y. And everybody gets to make their own decision as a speaker, because then within the triad, they'll be switching roles so that each person has a chance to be the speaker and also is the receiver and also is the observer coach. When we come back together, A nice way to start the discussion is sort of the second part of the sentence I've got here. It's a great way early in the course to build some goodwill, build some community. Observers, coaches, talk to me. What's the best thing you saw somebody do and why? So it's a very good way to start building some class community and have them be able to say nice things about each other. And they've done most of the feedback in their triad. So if somebody isn't happy with the way they did it, that doesn't have to come up in the class discussion. So there's a lot of safety in having them do most of the feedback in the given groups. And then sort of last bullet I've got here, helps the students understand the research, right? They have to talk about it. So they have to have grappled with the cases to be able to do it to some degree. And then they listen to two of their other colleagues also talk about those cases. And we've now got a more level playing field on which they can start doing the drafting that they'll have to do next. So I think there's a number of great professional identity formation skills and also substantive skills that help them move forward in where they need to be in class. My last point here is I often will give them another tool to start thinking about communication, which is this concept of ladder of inference. And it's simply the idea that we often argue at the level of conclusions. I'm right, you're wrong, you're ugly too, right? So then we devolve, right? And if we, as a communicator, can push down the ladder of inference, how'd you get that? What was the methodology? What was the reasoning you used to get to the conclusion that you've articulated? And then further down, what data are you looking at to apply a methodology to then reach a conclusion? And that often comes up in the context of this discussion, but to have them walk away with a tool like ladder of inference that they can then use in many different contexts to enhance their communication in a lot of different ways. So then, as I promised, these are the actual roles that I hand out to the students, participant A, B, and C, where they each rotate among those different roles in triads. So I hope that's helpful. I think it is adaptable in a few different ways, and I'm happy to talk about any questions at the end. Thanks so much.
Robin, thank you so much. And I should have mentioned, I'm sure folks will be clamoring to get their hands on your slides and the slides of our other presenters. For everybody, just want to let you know that number one, the recording today will be posted on our AALS YouTube channel. And then we are also going to be compiling a compendium of sorts with materials from all of the SpeedShare presentations that have been offered this summer. And we will make those available on the AALS Section website in a non-password protected area. So you will have access to all kinds of slides, materials, and other items from our presenters. All right, well, thank you again, Robin. And we are going to move now to Jerry Organ. Jerry is the Bakken Professor of Law and Co-Director of the Holleran Center for Ethical Leadership in the Professions at the University of St. Thomas School of Law.
Thank you all. Glad to have you all here and thrilled to have heard the initial presentations. I'm not going to be focused on this today, but I just want to say what the concept Robin just presented on, and I really appreciate the idea of focusing on the speaker. We have a similar exercise in this course I'm going to be talking about, focused on delivering bad news. And it's structured in the same triad formula, and it's a pretty effective way to give students a chance to practice and to feel what it's like to deliver bad news. So we have a course called Serving Clients Well. It's a 1-week intensive course offered in January, right before the spring semester starts. It is very purposefully located there to engage students at a point in time where they might be a little discouraged by their academic performance with respect to how they're doing thinking like a lawyer, and to emphasize to them that while thinking like a lawyer is really important, being a successful lawyer also involves a variety of relationship skills, both with clients and with others. And so the focus is communication, some cross-cultural communication, problem solving, teamwork, project management, and then morality and integrity, the importance of one's own character. And we do have students do a self-reflective exercise involving the VIA that Heidi mentioned, which is a great resource to help them understand their strengths. There are 2 written products in that course. One is called The Roadmap, using Neil Hamilton's Roadmap book. So it's a self-exploration of strengths and areas of interest as they begin looking forward. But the other is an attorney interview, and that's what I signed up to talk about today. So after we finish the class, we give them an assignment that they're going to do in groups of 3 to interview an attorney. And so we've talked about project management. So we give them the timeline for delivery, and we ask them to identify a project plan, right? How are they going to do what they're going to do? When is it going to be done? Who's doing what? So they can kind of hold each other accountable. They're responsible for identifying an attorney they're going to interview. We don't have a slate of selected attorneys who meet our profile. It is whoever they want. They can grab. We ask them to interview in person. We have accommodated Zoom interviews over the last couple of years, but we are going to probably move back toward encouraging them to conduct these interviews in person. They tend to be about 45 minutes to an hour. There are 4 required themes they have to talk about with their attorneys, consistent with things we have talked about in class. So they have to engage the attorney about the client selection process. We didn't cover that. I just think it's important for them to be aware that in different practice areas, attorneys don't take every client who comes in the door. And so they get some exposure to that. The nature of the client relationship. So how directive, how client-centered, how authoritarian is the attorney? Competencies, we talk a lot about the variety of competencies that are essential to be a successful lawyer, whether it's the Schultz-Zedek effectiveness factors or some of the key competencies highlighted in the AALS Foundations for Practice. And so we want them to hear from the attorney what that attorney thinks are competencies necessary for success. And then because we have a session on morality and integrity, we want them to talk with the attorney about the extent to which they see practice of law as a moral enterprise and whether there have been issues of integrity that they've had to deal with. And then we give them, so those are 4 themes they have to talk about. And then we give them some autonomy to choose other themes, so leadership, problem solving, project management, teamwork, or something else they might be interested in. In total, they're interviewing about 6 different themes. And then they have to work together after they're done with the interview. You know, they take notes, they do whatever, and then they have to work together on a 1,000 to 1,500 words, so essentially a 4 to 6 page summary of the interview that is not a script, but kind of captures the essence of some of what they heard, with a little bit of engagement. So if the attorney says something very contradictory to what we talked about in class, we kind of hope they'll say something about that. They'll reflect on that a little bit. So that's most of this, but then we have them all get together. So kind of the last class session is a lunch gathering where we have a conversation about their experience of the interview, so that a group who interviewed a criminal law attorney, for example, can hear about what a family law attorney or a business law attorney or whatever else said, and can get a sense for similarities and differences that different groups might have heard. And then their final individual project is a reflection exercise, which has two prompts. One is about the experience working in a group, what went well, what didn't go well. And then the second is what is their takeaway from the interview, both the interview with their attorney and then what they heard from the conversations that others shared about the interviews with their attorneys. This has been tremendously helpful to us, because even though we don't identify who they get to interview, with remarkable regularity, the attorneys reaffirm the things we've told them in the classroom. And so you can't get a better deal than to say something in the classroom and have a random attorney say almost the exact same thing and have them think, did you call this person? No, we didn't even know who you were interviewing, right? And then sometimes you have the wacky attorney who says something completely off message, and then you have the student reaction to, that took us back, and we were, that's not who we want to be as attorney, which is fine as well. Somebody asked how many are in the groups. The groups are 3 generally, although the composition of the class, it's usually somewhere between 38 and 42 people. And so sometimes there's a group of 4, just because of how things break. But happy to answer questions once everybody else is done. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry. And I'm sure that there will be questions at the end of all the presentations. I have a couple. It sounds like a great exercise. Next, we have Sue Schechter. Sue is the Field Placement Director at the UC Berkeley School of Law. And Jerry, I don't know if you have Sue's slides, but if you don't, I have them and I can present them.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jerry. I owe you a drink the next time I see you. So hi, folks. So I know the reason you're really on is to just get this list of lawyer biographies. So I'm not going to keep you waiting on that any longer, and I'm going to actually put it in the chat. It's also included on my PowerPoint, but let me tell you a little about this project that I do. And to my dear externship friends on this call, you have heard this before at least once. And so bear with me. Hopefully you'll get something new out of it. I want to say that basically I came to this, and I want to say it's not my idea. I'm certain I stole it from someone else. So whoever that was, I give you much credit for it. And the other thing I want to say is that, basically, I was doing a lot of this lawyering skills in my field placement classes, like how to be a good listener, how to do a good interview. And then the world fell apart, right? Politics, 5-6 years ago, COVID, remote. And I realized I couldn't, that wasn't my strength, and that wasn't my role in the classroom. So I started to kind of really search for a way that I could push, help, encourage students to really think about, like, who are you and why are you here? And where do you want to go with this? So I heard this idea, got this idea, however that works, and students started bringing, reading biographies as a way to align their reflection. So Jerry, you can go to the next slide, thanks. So because every one of these presentations has to have the ABA standards somewhere in it, really excited that standard 303 is finally acknowledging the importance of professional identity. So you've all seen this, probably all have it almost memorized by now, but given this need to help students develop a profession, I love this, the development of a professional identity, like only one, and then it's done. And sorry for any of you ABA folks who worked on it, but I thought the language was quite funny. And then also, we're also, I know, all excited and really eager to start thinking about how we can do more education around bias, cross-cultural competency, and racism. So just never enough of that. And this exercise allows students to do that. And then the third, and then also that really came up because as the director of a field placement program, somehow field placements and clinics end up taking the bulk of, it feels like end up taking the bulk of the responsibility on this, right? Have to do this around, before, concurrently with. And then finally, if you're wondering why reflection at all, is because those of us in the externship world, our pedagogy just requires it and is best practice, and we live and breathe by reflection. So that's kind of where this came from. And then Jerry, you can go to the next slide. So because it's important to teach as we practice here. So what, now what, right? I use that every semester in my classes. What, so what, now what? So what, this is a biography reflection class idea. So what, it promotes and encourages reflection as required by the ABA and best practices. And now what, how to make it work for your classes, take it forward, other reflections, books. So again, hopefully, thanks, Jerry. And then Jerry just moved to why. Why? Because reflection is so important. Students have a hard time reflecting. I think we all know that. Some students are, we all know this, they're very caught up in the current moment. They're worried about the summer internship. They're worried about their loans. They're worried about the first job. I mean, all real things. What I hope to do is get them to step back or step aside a little bit, I want to say, maybe even step forward and, keep the vision, keep the dream, keep the hope alive, I guess we could say. So, and it dawned on me that a lot of my law students could not list 3 to 5 lawyers, right? They could list their supervisors, they could list really famous lawyers, but they kind of didn't really have a clue, like how do lawyers work and how do they change the world and how do they make it better and what's their role? So this was an idea. So I'm sorry, let me just step aside and also tell you what this why is. So in my class, another thing we always do is this why exercise. If we ask a student a question and they say why, and we do this as a pair and share, but the students have to ask their partner 5 times why. So I'm just looking for someone with a good color. Jerry, you're wearing a white shirt. Jerry, why are you wearing a white shirt? Jerry answers, want to answer why you're wearing a white shirt? You're on mute, Jerry. Go back to that slide first, but you just answered, but so Jerry's wearing this white shirt. Why is Jerry wearing this white shirt? Because he likes white. Jerry, why do you like white shirts? Right. And then, I mean, you can see how, sometimes the students get frustrated because they're like, I don't know why, just why. But really pushing them to really kind of begin to articulate their whys is really important. And so I've given you some selective prompts here. Why did you select your placement? Why did you select your book? Any connection here? I had a student once who is working at a legal services organization. So she wanted to read a book about a legal services lawyer. I have to tell you guys, it's not the easiest thing in the world to find a book about an everyday legal services lawyer. So we went to NLADA, National Legal Aid and Defender Association, and we found a book. But it's just, I want to encourage you because really, finding the book is part of the process, right? Because they could all read Sotomayor, Ginsburg, right? Michelle Obama, but I'm telling you, like really engaging with these students, why did you pick that book? Are you sure that's the right book? And now as I'm in the 3rd, 4th, 5th semester of using this exercise, I've had more than a few students who change their book, right? They say, I'm going to read Obama's biography. Well, it's 900 pages and, it's Barack Obama going on and on and on. So, about a week in, they like, maybe I want to read something else. Some of the other prompts, compare your lawyering styles, skills. Again, they think it's a little funny. I'm comparing, this famous lawyer to the supervisor I have at my placement. But, yes, get some context, right? Like how does it fit in? How does it fit into your life? I can tell you, I had a student who read Nelson Mandela's A Long Walk to Freedom. And he said in his reflection, my supervisor reminds me of Nelson Mandela. And I said, again, because this is a go back and forth with them. Well, why is that? How is that? And he said, he's really on task, but he really has a vision. So, and I said, you must tell your supervisor that. He will be the supervisor loved it. He went around for weeks telling people like, my student says I'm like Nelson Mandela. But so great stuff like that comes out of this. It's great for the supervisors. It's great for the students. I have to say, I know I pushed Michelle Obama's book aside a little bit, but I can't tell you how many students, how many students, how many students related to it in so many ways, I think, but if you read it, I think she might've been waitlisted at a school. So for our students to hear that, like, what do you mean? It didn't all come easily to her, things like that. So I'm gonna wrap up in just 1 minute. So I've shared the list of books with you, I've shared some of the prompts. I love this as a storytelling exercise, right? What's your story? What's their story? Just telling stories. And then just, really encouraging you, if you choose to take this on, to just use it as a real back and forth with your students. The other thing I'll end with is students love this. Like, they have to tell you how many times they tell me, I can't believe I'm getting to read a book doesn't have cases in it. I'm getting to read, and so I just want to really encourage you to think about bringing something different like this in. We are living in a moment, right? And our students, I don't know about you guys, but I've been doing a lot of advising the last 2 or 3 weeks. Why am I in law school? Am I going to be able to do social justice work? Am I going to be what kind of lawyer am I going to be? And I assure them, you're not taking a lot of cases to the Supreme Court, but I do think, they're really struggling with what is their role and what is the rule of law and all that. So I think I'll end there. Happy to answer any questions and happy to share prompts, materials, or anything.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. And Jerry, you did a fantastic job advancing the slides. So applause to you as well. For our final presentation, we have David Thompson, Professor of Practice at the University of Denver, Sturm College of Law. David, it's all yours.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you to my fellow panelists for a wonderful presentation. I feel like we should all take a deep breath now. That was a lot of really wonderful information and ideas coming at us in a fairly compressed format. Back when the Carnegie Report came out, there was a lot of discussion about Chapter 4, and conferences were held, etc. And as teachers, our automatic response was, well, this is something we can teach. And maybe it's appropriate that I come last alphabetically today, because I'd like to do a little bit of summary and then offer maybe a broader look at some possibilities than teaching techniques. The simple insight I offered, gosh, almost 10 years ago now, is that formation of professional identity is not actually something we can teach, at least not didactically. Some law schools, including our own, had orientation lectures where judges and prominent attorneys come in and point fingers and say, you have to be ethical, this is an ethical profession. And I believe that has very little effect. I did learn see a little bit of research about the white coat ceremony that they use in medical schools. That probably does have some little effect in terms of formation of professional identity. Maybe we need something like that. I'll never forget being in the room, Jerry, when you said something really quite profound, was that we were teaching formation of professional identity in everything we do, including the Socratic method. As Professor Abrams noted, Socratic method really undermines formation of professional identity, as she said. We've been teaching it. Sometimes I think of that moment when you said that, Jerry, as we teach that we should slither along the line of just being barely ethical. By many examples that we give, overt and implicit, and the ethics class itself. But it seems to me that we need to go beyond bolt-on exercises or even one-week classes, with all due respect to all those exercises and that one-week class, Jerry. And we need to design full courses with formation of professional identity opportunities embedded in them, and then ideally move it to the full curriculum in law school. And my hope is that these kinds of discussions will lead us in that direction. Many years ago, I started teaching a class in addition. I think it's very interesting. I want to note that many of the teachers here are lawyering process faculty. It seems to always fall to us first to be the experimenters and the developers of these kinds of new methods and techniques in legal education. That may be a bit of an overstatement, but it feels that way sometimes. And it felt that way listening to all of you. But I think we need an intentional pedagogy for building courses that embed throughout the formation of professional identity. For more than 20 years, I've taught a course in upper level class in discovery law. And so very quickly, I want to go through a PowerPoint that I think will illustrate what I try to do in that class. So again, I think we need an intentional pedagogy that's designed to create situations in which students then face and form their professional identity. As I said, I don't think we can teach it. We can teach the floor, that's the ethics class. But I think the Carnegie Report is really talking about more than that. Instead, we have to create situations in which formation can occur. We know that human formation of all kinds happens through experience, exposure, and struggle. So my proposal in an article I wrote some years ago, 6-7 years ago, is for a guided sequence of professional identity formation that has an exercise of writing assignment. And you've heard many of these kinds of things already today that involves identification of an issue and reflection on that. I did it in this discovery, a whole course simulation course of a mock litigation with students enrolled, preparing documents every week, every time confronted by an ethical quandary, have to make their own decisions, and then share that privately within a memo, and I respond with comments in a rubric. I have embedded in the learning outcomes for the entire course to identify and evaluate ethical dilemmas that arise in the discovery context and reflect on the formation of their identity as the course is going on. So an intentional pedagogy with new teaching materials that involves both lean back reading and lean forward through more interactive exercises online. Students always in the lawyer role, and we heard that as well from some of our earlier presenters. It's all about putting them in the lawyer role. There is some lecture, discussion, workshop to the class period. We learn the tools and then we apply them every week. So we're doing a civil litigation, plaintiff and defendant counsel pairs, 8 witness, 2 expert, each student plays a part. Each student gets part of the file, but not all of it. Of course, they have to use the discovery tools to get the rest. They prepare all these documents, interrogatories, answers to the set they received, document requests, requests they received, requests to admit. They conduct a deposition with a student court reporter, and eventually last class settle the case. Throughout every single week, they're exposed to ethical issues. The assessment piece is in this memo to me every week that comes with the document that they produce. Yeah, I'm reviewing that and the document every week. But the feedback then I give them, I look for the identification of the ethical issue and the reflection that they've offered. Not that it's a right reflection, right? They're forming their own identities. We're talking about above the ethical line. Was it thoughtfully addressed, clearly expressed with depth? It's 20% of the ranking for every single assignment. So this is a 4 and a 5 out of a 1 through 5 scale, how I describe it. Here's some things that students have said over the years in their reflection memos, and I won't read these. I'll let you take a moment to read them and scroll through them. So those are very quick description of an entire course that has formation of professional identity embedded in it. And again, I'd be delighted to answer any questions you may have about it and be glad to share slides or rubrics or the like from my class.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, David, and a round of applause to all of our presenters today. Thank you all so much. Happily, because everybody adhered to time limits, we do have plenty of time for question and answer and discussion. So I certainly invite any of our attendees to hop in with any questions you might have. I'll also monitor the chat. And certainly if our presenters have questions for one another, please feel free to bring those to the fore as well.
Well, I have a question. This is Sue. Heidi, is that an actual book? I'm so sorry, but it seems amazing. And you went through so many tools so quickly. I would love to just, I don't know if hear more or just like promote your book more or something.
Thank you. It is an actual book. I'm holding it in my hand. I still am scared to actually open the pages for fear I might see a glaring typo, but but yes, I basically took I wanted to approach flourishing and helping our students through kind of this athlete performer model, because I feel like it's empowering for students to feel like they're more than just a brain. You know, they're more than, there's this great quote by this author, Caroline Williams, who said, we're more than just a brain on legs. You know, we have this whole body that helps us function. And for me, I've written a book called The Introverted Lawyer. I wrote one called Untangling Fear in Lawyering, where I'm very vulnerable and open with my students about grappling with extreme public speaking anxiety for 20 years, 15 years as a litigator, and 5, you know, the first years of my teaching. And so the book kind of it starts with the physical dimension. I mean, I go into the whole character and fitness thing and delve into the character strengths, because that has really, having that language around character strengths has really changed my whole approach to helping students feel like their individuality matters. And nobody's strengths are more important than someone else's. That's why I love that 5.1 million constellation stat, because we all all our students bring incredible gifts to the classroom that get overlooked a lot. So the book talks about character, and then it goes into these 10 dimensions of fitness, starting with the National Task Force's dimensions, but then I add the 4 more. But I start with the physical dimension and really go into how we can help our students, especially the ones who grapple with anxiety and fear. And you know, they're doing the work. They're doing the substantive intellectual work, but a lot of them don't know how to process, and because I didn't either, how to process what's happening to us physically in the classroom or during a test or in a Socratic Q&A or in an interview, or in these reflection exercises. There's so much that happens in our bodies. So the book goes into a lot of detail about that. And I tried in each section to do a lot of the things that all of you have talked about today, give sort of the research behind each of these dimensions, but then exercises we can do as individuals, but also in groups, providing language for us as teachers to share our own journeys through all these different dimensions of our own lives. And then, and for the students to reflect about that. So there's research, there's exercises, there's reflection, there's conversation pieces. So yeah, it's all there. So the PDF that Janice put in the chat is an appendix of the book, and it's basically a model for getting these conversations started. And I'm still grappling with where this could fit in a curriculum. I teach legal writing. I run the writing program. I direct the writing program at Brooklyn Law School. And it's too much stuff to fit into, and I don't know where it should go or could go, but at least it's conversation starters that, especially for our students that are struggling, we can give them bite-sized nuggets of information to start grappling with all these 10 dimensions and start giving themselves regard like an athlete or an artist or a performer, which they are. They're all of those things.
I had a quick question for David. Sorry, Sue, did you want to follow up? So I love the takeaways from what you just described, that students are reflecting deeply on their decision making and able to have a moral compass about something that's as sort of ordinary seeming as discovery. But how did you create the materials in the first instance to do a class on discovery? If they're wading through documents, figuring out what to produce and how to answer interrogatories, how did you get the corpus of information to give them those exercises to begin with? Did you write it all? Did you steal it from some other case that you then redacted? How did that happen?
I practiced for 20 years before I switched to teaching. But the first time I taught this course was as an adjunct 30 years ago. So I've iterated it over the years. And now I have a textbook in the Skills and Values series published by Carolina on discovery practice. And it comes with all the materials for a product liability drug case with very different plaintiff and defendant, a big corporation obviously producing the drug, and Olympic hopeful snowboarder as the plaintiff who had physical injury because of a drug that he or she took. All the names work either way, and males and females play the roles in the depositions, and it's very flexible problem set. But yeah, it took me a good chunk of the last 15 years to develop it and refine it. But I think they're out there. Actually, Elizabeth, I really feel like we not only need to embed formation and professional identity in all of our courses in this fundamental way that I described in the discovery class, and I think it can be done in any course, but we need to have different teaching materials to teach those courses with, particularly as we also cross in the future hybridization of legal education, about which I'm writing a book this summer. So, and I believe the hybridization online and a hybrid that we've learned so much about, somewhat against our will in the last couple of years, actually facilitates the breaking down of the Socratic method and facilitates the introduction and use of smaller tools, exercises, these guided sequences for professional identity formation that can be done in that more hybrid teaching environment. But now we've really gone beyond the topic of this talk, and I apologize.
Thank you, David, and thanks, Elizabeth, for the question. Sue, I did notice that you were taking yourself off mute before. Did you have a follow-up for Heidi?
Well, I only to mention, you know, there's a book that really stood out, but it's called Devil in the Grove. And I can't remember who it's by, but it's about Thurgood Marshall. And I've had a handful of students who've read it, and it's about his cases in Florida. But what it also talks about how his personal life just fell apart. And like, I mean, I have to say, it's really hit students very hard because, you know, Thurgood Marshall is like a hero to them, right? And so to hear the challenges and what he had to, you know, I mean, he made a choice basically to give up a personal life and to give up I don't want to say family, but basically a family to do this work. And I think for our, I mean, obviously our students aren't going to be Thurgood Marshall, but I don't think they get to grapple with that very much in our classes. And so I do think seeing like, you know, these lawyers as real people and choices they make. And I loved your way to define wellness. I just think it's really this functional wellness piece. Like, you probably can't have it all. So like, who are you and what are your, you know, so I'll shut up, but it really struck me that we also need to be discussing that because students have to figure out where they fit in.
Thank you. Yes, I feel like we can I know I feel like I can do a better job and need to work harder at teaching our students what it means to be critical thinkers and to make decisions and understand moral and ethical decision making. Because I think a lot of our students come to law school feeling like they should already know how to do that, but they don't know what that actually looks like in reality. And so creating an environment in which they can feel comfortable saying, I don't know what the right answer to this question is. And I think it's good for us, especially, the years we've practiced, to share anecdotes of when we didn't get it right and when the decision was a really difficult one and maybe it seems like we should have known what to do, but we didn't. The more we can get our students used to talking about those things out loud and making mistakes in law school where it's safe to do that, I think will help them form the type of persona they want to have as an ethical and moral and well-functioning lawyer. But it takes a lot of work, but we can support them in doing that.
I just wanted to add that the exercise of the attorney interview is something that I added to the first year course some years ago. I don't know if I got that idea from you, Jerry, or somewhere else, very likely from you. But so it's the second assignment in the fall for my first years to interview an attorney. We have a mentorship program, and so it also serves as an icebreaker for them to, hey, I have an assignment. Could I come and talk to you? And they do that, and I have a list. Jerry's, I'm sure, is better, but I have a list of things I want them to try to address in there. And one of them is to ask the attorney to reflect on an ethical dilemma that they found themselves in. And again, that's embedded formation of professional identity opportunity for them. And the richness of those memos, just 2 weeks into law school, is extraordinary. I highly recommend that kind of an exercise.
Actually, just kind of picking up where David left off there, Jerry, one of the questions that I had for you, how do students respond, first year students, how do they respond to this suggestion that they need to go out into the community and find an attorney to speak with? Has that ever proven difficult, or how have you overcome those hurdles to the extent that those hurdles exist?
So I break the ice over the Christmas break when as part of this course, before we meet, they also have to talk to a client. So I've already made them do something a little bit hard, right? They have to find a client. And, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a family member. But it has not, we also have the mentor program. So all of our students have a mentor all 3 years. But so a number of students end up having the interview be with one of their mentors. But sometimes their mentor isn't right. So one of the things about the project plan is helping them. It's not a very long time frame. So they have to kind of get stuff done and get stuff scheduled. And sometimes the first two attorneys they want to talk to aren't available. They don't have an hour in the next 2 weeks. And so, but I don't think there's a problem with making them get their shoes dirty and walk around and figure, the equivalent of walking around and trying to find somebody. So it has not been, we have not gotten great complaints about that.
Fantastic. And even if you had, I would agree with you that it doesn't seem too much to ask
Right.
them to get their shoes a little dirty. It's a good exercise in professional formation and professionalism, probably. So thanks, Jerry. I was just curious about that. Other questions for our presenters? Please feel free to just unmute yourself, jump right in.
Sue, I had a question for you just about the timing of your project. I mean, reading a book takes a while. And then, is this a series of reflections on the book? Is it one thing that's done when the book is done, do they have 6 weeks to do this? Do they have 2 months to do it? It sounded, as you were talking about it, like there was an ongoing dialogue of some sort, which makes me think there were some interim deliverables they had, but I'd just be curious about that.
Hi, thank you. And yeah, our colleague Jerry Muir was direct messaging me about that. But so students do a class component when they do a field placement. So they do a class component that meets throughout the semester. So the first reflective prompt, why the placement, why the book, is about, the first 2 weeks. And then, 4 weeks later, they're doing the second one, look at lawyering skills, lawyering styles, what are you seeing? And then the final one, yeah, all students do an interview with an attorney at their placement. And that is, a week or two before the class ends. So it's throughout the semester. Yeah, sometimes they'll say, I haven't finished my book. And it's like, you don't have to finish it. You can be 25 pages into it and answer this prompt. So, but yes, it's throughout.
Actually, I have a quick question for Heidi, if I could. I was really interested in your, I think it was the creativity dimension, and just if you could speak a little bit more about that, if there, how you sort of build that out in your class. Thanks.
Sure, yes. I was just sharing with someone in a private chat. The creativity dimension is the one I'm most excited about after the physical dimension, because I think it helps switch a light on in the students' minds that law is creative. We have to be creative problem solvers. The answer is not always clear. And so I go into, I quote a lot of people who say that, creativity is part of health. It's if we can explore our artistic side, it turns on a different switch in our brain. And it doesn't take a lot of time for us to do that. So many of our students come to law school and they've been rock stars, or they've been performing artists as teenagers, or they're painters or they're dancers, and they squash all that when they come in our classroom. So to give them permission to talk about that, first of all, what it felt like for them to be an artist in their past, or if they've always wanted to be an artist, it just gives them a little bit of permission to use a different part of their brain. And then, so the book just kind of gives some prompts on how to do that, how to tap into that and be messy, be not good at it, be imperfect, and then see how that can trigger or lead to creative problem solving related to the law. And then, so one thing that I do for my own well-being, I'm a huge fan of the book by Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. It actually kind of saved my life, 20 years ago when I was going through a really rough time. And she gives kind of 3 suggestions on how to tap into your inner artist. And one is called Morning Pages. And it's just 3 pages of handwritten, scribbling, journaling every single morning. And I talk to my students about how I do that, no matter where I am in the world or what's going on in my life. And so I try to use, quote, real artists who have techniques like that can help us not only tend to our well-being, but figure out who we are. And so I think that drives the conversation around professional identity, who we are and who we want to be. What type of persona do we want to have as lawyers? So I talk about Julia Cameron's work, Twyla Tharp, the choreographer. There's a great series of books by a guy named Stephen Pressfield. He wrote The War of Art, not the war on art, but the war of art, and how art can be a battle between artist and art, but how we can break through that. I love his little books are really short and they're really approachable. And so for students who want a boost of energy around tapping into their creativity, I recommend Stephen Pressfield's books. So the chapter, it's my second favorite chapter after the physical one. And it just gives students permission to be messy artists and hopefully help them in their legal studies. I do relate it all back to law school, don't worry. Law school and lawyering. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about that offline too, and anybody else if they have more questions about that. But it's a fun time. You're welcome.
Other questions for our presenters? We have 1 minute. Maybe you can be the person who slides in at the end, asking that killer question. Anybody? Jordana, I saw you come on screen if you wanted to ask a question.
Oh, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone because this has been so fabulous. So I won't take up the last question space.
Well, that would be a perfect note to end on. So I don't think anybody would complain about that. Well, in truth, this has been awesome. I do want to express my thanks to all of our presenters and our attendees. I always want to remind folks, the chat always has some great stuff going on, and you can save the chat. So if you are inclined to do that, you can hit those three little dots at the bottom of the chat, and that gives you the opportunity to save the chat. And you can refer back to all these great comments. There's links in the chat to previous recordings, as well as to our 6th and final speed share session coming up at the end of this month. But again, I just want to say thank you to our presenters and to everybody for being here today. This was an awesome event. Look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at session 6. Thanks, everyone.